thanks so much for joining me for this week's Nature Chats video. I'm so glad that you're out here with me today. It's really mild, really gorgeous. The sun is just kind of coming through the background there, and I just thought this would be a nice place to kind of set up and speak. So I thought that this week we would talk about the idea of taking risks. And we've heard that saying before, haven't we? That, you know, take a risk, take a leap of faith. But how many of us wake up in the morning, jump out of bed and think, today's the day I'm going to take a massive risk? Honestly, and this is me myself as well, the idea of sometimes taking risks for us brings about fear, because a risk means that we don't always know what the outcome's going to be. A risk means that we're going to have to do something that makes us feel afraid. And our animal human instinct, if we feel fear, is to kind of pull away from it. We have that fight or flight mode, don't we? Fight, fight or freeze. That is our innate kind of setting to how to deal with fear. And even if there's not a lion jumping out of the bushes trying to eat us, that fear of taking that risk can be just as limiting, really, as if that was the case. But let's just talk about why taking risks is so important for us and how we can go about doing it. So the first thing that we can do when we take a risk is to just start by making things a lot harder for ourselves. This might sound like really crazy kind of guidance, but think about when we go to the gym. You know, if we're at the gym and we start running or we start any kind of new exercise regime, it might be hard at first, but then over time we're going to acclimatize to it and it's going to become something that's a lot easier for us. If we don't push ourselves to the next level at that point, if we don't make it harder for ourselves, if we don't add those weights on to the machines, then the muscle won't grow. The same as in our own personal lives. If we don't make things slightly harder for ourselves, then we're not going to be able to grow anywhere. I'll give you a little example. I was working at a university a few years ago, and it was one of my roles to go around to schools and other universities and give presentations. And I put this presentation together about my journey through the educational system. It worked pretty well. You know, I'd go to the schools to do the presentation, the head teacher would thank me, the staff would thank me, you know, the students would clap, and it was working well. But one day I got to this school and I just thought, these guys are really innovative, like they are very different maybe to other schools I'd been to, or perhaps I was just picking up on a different vibe that day. And I loaded the presentation and I thought, no, I'm going to do something completely radical here. And so I got rid of the PowerPoint. I said I didn't want to use the stick, and on the spot I created a workshop that I was going to do with the students instead. It was completely improvised, and I just kind of rolled with it. And after I gave the presentation, the head teacher came to me and said, "That was really good. Have you ever thought about going into teaching?" And I was shocked because it was such a risk to do it that way, but I wanted to start making things a little bit harder for myself because I didn't want to get into this thing of being stagnant with this one presentation that was okay, yeah, it was working fine, but what growth does that bring to me as a person, and what growth does that bring to the work that I was doing? So that's a little example of how we can just make things a little bit harder for ourselves. We don't have to go extreme, but just pushing ourselves out of our comfort zones in that way is going to help us grow and flourish. The second thing that we can do, if we want to really take some risks in our life, is to change things. We may have a formula in our lives that is working right now, whether that's within our relationships with other people. You know, we may get up, we may brush our teeth, we may get changed, we may go to work, we may ring our friends at lunchtime, we may come home, we may have our dinner. You know, we have these routines that may be working in our lives that we think, okay, cool, my life's kind of going along steadily. I know where I am, I feel in control of my life. Why would I want to change it? Well, the thing is, if we don't make any changes in our daily routines, in our daily lives, if we don't take those leaps of faith and do things that may seem radical to us, then how are we going to grow? How are we going to get those pearls of wisdom? How are we going to change our lives? We can sit at home all day if we wanting our lives to change, wanting more joy and happiness in our lives, but then if we don't take the steps to change it, if we don't shake things up a little bit, then we're going to get the same results. And what happens if we don't make our lives a bit more difficult for ourselves. If we don't make those decisions to make changes, then we stay in the same place. We've just become reactive to the world around us, and that's actually more disempowering than if we just take that risk and just take that leap of faith. That is more empowering, even though we don't always have control over the outcome. It's actually a more empowering way of living our lives rather than just being stuck in a rut, in a sense. And the third way to take a risk is to share. Share. This is something in my own personal life that I have found extremely difficult, personally. This is talking about sharing our feelings, sharing our thoughts, and sharing our knowledge. These are the three main areas that a lot of us freak out about. If we really share our feelings with somebody else, or our friends or other people around us, how are they going to be received? That's a fear. We take a risk. If I really share my thoughts with somebody else, how is that going to be received? Will they still feel the same way about me? That is a risk. And if I share my knowledge with other people, what are they going to do with that? When I first started my business, I had a lot of people come to me and ask me simple questions like what technology I used, what camera I was using, what software I was using. I was so reluctant to share that information at first. Not because I felt like I didn't want to give, but because I was scared that if I did, then everybody else would just go off and do better stuff than me with the knowledge that I'd shared. And that is really honest, and that's honestly how I felt. And it freaked me out that if I share my knowledge, then I give away my power. That is how I felt. And one way that we can kind of rectify that fear and blow it out the water is to just start doing it. Just start sharing, start giving, and just start being more open. And it's baby steps at first. At least it was for me. It is those small baby steps that help us to get there. But ultimately, that sharing of our wisdom and knowledge, that humbleness, the sharing of our thoughts and ideas can only create more good in the world. But that is a risk. It does feel like a risk because people could hear your thoughts and feelings and feel differently about you or I. People could hear our knowledge and wisdom and then take that and put more resources behind it and steal our ideas. That could happen. But what could also happen is something so much more profound and more beautiful. We can actually build trust in relationships. We can actually build intimacy. A lot of this taking a risk is really allowing ourselves to be intimate with other people. And to create that kind of intimacy, we have to take risks. We have to relinquish a little bit of control, because if we don't, then we put up these barriers, we disconnect, we don't allow ourselves to connect with the world around us, and what can actually happen is people become fearful of us. So isn't that weird how if we don't take a risk, people can become fearful of us because they think, well, why is that person so closed? What's that person trying to hide? Why isn't that person sharing? What is it about them? You can't get in. It's like these walls are up. So if we don't take the risks and face our own fears, other people can in fact become fearful of us. And that is why it's so important to push ourselves in that way, so that we can create the wonderful life that we want to live, but also build those wonderful connections with others, those deep bonds with others, letting other people in, being interdependent. We don't want to be completely codependent on other people, but being completely independent is lonely and it's sad and it's not living our lives. We are interdependent, and taking risks is going to bring us closer to having deep connections with people. Taking risks is going to build more intimacy. Taking risks is going to help us grow and flourish and just be the best versions of ourselves. So I hope that you guys have enjoyed this week's Nature Chat. I'm going to go for a little bit of a stroll now and enjoy the rest of this sunshine this afternoon. I'm wishing you so much love and peace and joy. Take the risks, be the trailblazer, and watch those relationships flourish. And we can all watch our own personal growth and development flourish as well. Until we speak again for our next Nature Chats video, I'm sending you so much love. Lots of love, Alyssa.